August date. So I don't know if there's any questions with regards to the report, but I'm here to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Brian, and thanks for the report. I think that adjusting that schedule is, given the circumstances that our residents find themselves in, I think it's the right thing to do. Questions to Brian on this particular report? Councillor Howie.
Yes, just one, through the mayor, just one quick question. I had one inquiry from a resident that doesn't really have access to internet, and they want to know where the information is going to come out about the garbage, about extending it.
Brian, do you have the answer to that, or Heather?
If I can, Taylor, to answer that question, Councillor Howie, the information is going on the tax bills. We did put it in under the garbage and recycling newsletter of this new date. I think we felt that council was going to extend this by a couple months, so that is at the publishers right now. So they'd be getting anyone that owns property or the business would be getting tax bill would see that information in their newsletter if they don't have access to the website. Would that be correct, Heather, in saying that?
It is. It actually was in the last newsletter as well, if people read that. But they can call. I've had a few people that don't have access to internet. They have called me, and I've actually sent out that fact sheet that I provided council with, that's on the website. So I have had a few calls, and I've sent the package out to them.
Okay, thank you.
So the reality is, if someone is currently using clear bags, such as this household, this extension doesn't mean anything. But if you're not using clear bags, this extension will give you some time to make arrangements so that you can when the hard launch does take effect. Any other questions to Brian or members of staff? Councillor Allen. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. Just to address the report, and thanks, Brian, and thanks, staff. It appears that we've made some concessions in the recommendation to relaunch on August 4th, which takes into hopefully some consideration for our residents in the fact that we're going through the times we are with COVID-19, and not that all our residents would want to go out and source and procure clear bags right now. So I do appreciate that. I did want to, and I think we can possibly address it through this report with an amendment to the recommendation if councils would so desire. I would like to bring up the idea of moving it until after Labor Day. The first garbage pickup, I think I would suggest after Labor Day. And I do understand where staff are asking that or indicating that perhaps that some of our seasonal residents would come on board to the clear bag program with the August date, and I can appreciate that. I do believe, though, with none of us really knowing where we're going to be over the next months, I thought that maybe early September would be maybe a little better cushion for those residents who don't feel like or don't want to go looking and procuring clear bags at the time, or also with any of the confusion for our seasonal residents that are just coming in and maybe aren't aware of the program, and they may only be here or maybe here quite a bit less or less frequently this summer. As much as I can appreciate, it'd be nice to have them on board and understanding the program. It may be beneficial just to put it off until maybe we don't have as much confusion at that point in time. So that's my only suggestion with the recommendation, and I'd be prepared to make a motion to accept the recommendation with the amendment to I think September 8th will be the Tuesday after Labor Day.
Okay, well, that's enough. I'm going to take that as being a motion put forward on the floor. And the motion, Councillor Allen, if I heard you correctly, is to receive the report and approve the recommendation with the exception that the schedule be amended to start the hard launch on the first pickup day after the Labor Day weekend.
That'd be correct. Thank you.
Okay. Before we go any further, I need a seconder for that motion. Deputy Clerk, are you seconding it for
I'm
discussion?
seconding it, and yes, I'll second it with discussion.
Okay, so the motion has been put on the floor and seconded. Deputy Clerk, you wish to comment to it and speak to the motion, please?
Just to be totally clear, so we are moving by basically 1 month, the firm date, is that correct?
No, the firm date was supposed to be today, June 1st. The staff report recommended pushing it back 60 days. The motion recommends putting it back 90 days.
Okay,
Roughly.
so this is the soft, we're doing the soft.
We would still be in the soft launch. It's called the soft launch phase. Yes,
Yes.
this motion changes the recommendation in the staff report and moves it back by 1 month.
So
Roughly.
basically what we're doing is giving the summer for the soft launch.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct. Okay.
thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Powers. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Just, I am in support of the motion. I am curious, though, on a point of clarification as it relates to the notice of motion versus this report and whether or not the order. I just want to make sure we're doing this. You know, I'm not sure what the proper approach is. Well, we know we have a notice of motion coming in behind this with this news. So when we get to the notice of motion, assuming what we have on the floor passes, would that then be null and void and we would just remove that? Is that the process?
Thank you, Councillor Powers, and I've had this conversation with Councillor Allen. It seemed prudent to receive the staff report first before we dealt with the notice of motion. And depending upon what decision was made regarding the staff report, the notice of motion may or may not be withdrawn. That will be up to Councillor Allen, but he'll have that option.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else wishes to speak to the, and I've got all 4 councillor members here in front of me, good. Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? It's fairly clear. The report's there, the hard launch date would be moved back to, don't know the specific date, but it'd be the first collection day after the Labor Day weekend.
Can I speak, Mayor Taylor?
Brian, yes?
Yeah, so the date would be changed Tuesday, September the 8th. The Labor Day is
Yeah.
September 7th, so the official date would be the Tuesday, September the 8th.
Well, I'll have an answer for that to you right shortly, as soon as we take a vote on the motion, Brian.
Joe, I just have a question here.
Who has a question?
It's Greg here. I just have a question.
Okay.
We've gone ahead and we've started to prepare our newsletter because of timing to get it published. So as Brian had mentioned, that we have that August the 4th date in that newsletter. It may be already at print, so we're going to have to figure out if we do change to September, that's going to cause us a bit of a concern here that we may or may not be able to get those newsletters into the tax bills. So I just put that out there for council consideration.
Okay, any questions to that from members of council? I would be more concerned if we were moving it ahead of that date, but since we're moving it behind the date we're giving the residents, personally, I think it's less of a concern. If you can't change the date, Greg, then that's what you have to proceed with, and our residents will have a grace period of another month if this motion passes. Okay, motion's pretty clear, council. All in favor of that, moving it to September, I think Brian said the 8th. All in favor, hands up, please. Okay, I see Nick, Mark, Bonnie, and unfortunately Ken, but that's enough to carry the motion. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Brian. Okay, so now we'll move the notice of motion into our agenda. Councillor Allen, how do you wish to proceed with your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. In light of the decision that was just made, I can withdraw that notice of motion.
Fair enough. Notice of motion is withdrawn. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move down now to staff reports, building, planning, and property. And the first is 12.1 is a report on changes to the cannabis production and processing, an OPA and a ZBA. And I think Kent Randall is with us, and Kent, we'll let you start here, and you'll be going for a while.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Yeah, well, I'll try not to be too long. So I see that Sarah's bail has come on, and so Sarah, you all know, has been assisting me with the cannabis OPA and ZBA. So just to, as you all know, the council adopted OPA number 6 and approved the associated zoning bylaw amendment in November of last year. When it went to the county, there was just one part of the OPA that the county wasn't necessarily comfortable with. And so they had suggested that we make a slight adjustment, or basically a clerical amendment to the amendment, or a clerical edit to the amendment. And it was related to the understanding that cannabis production and cannabis cultivation can constitute an agricultural use, and we never said it couldn't in our original OPA. But the problem is that there could be some confusion that comes from that, especially in prime ag areas where you can only have agriculture-related, and on-farm diversified uses. So we wanted to ensure that cultivation was still permitted as an agricultural use, even though we had isolated it as a separate use, but it's still considered an agricultural use, really for the purposes of the PPS. So it was really just a matter of clarifying that in the wording and the definition. So we didn't see an issue with taking that back to council, just to essentially ratify it so that we could send it back on to the county for their approval. So that was one change. But as we went through the OPA, there were just a couple of other things that we noticed that we thought it would be worthwhile clarifying. Again, it's not that the policies would not have done what we wanted them to do. We just wanted to ensure that since we were changing this other item that the county had brought up, that we would change these other items that we had noticed. So the other three, one of them was just related to micro processing facilities in prime ag land. So if you recall, we had limited micro processing in prime ag lands because there's a certain there's a cutoff in terms of how big a building can be to be considered a micro processing facility versus a standard facility. And we did not want to have those standard facilities in prime ag areas because we wanted to save the prime ag land. And we didn't necessarily want to have a large cultivation or processing facility in those prime ag lands taking up valuable land. So we changed that, though, to in case there are outdoor operations that don't require cement foundations for their buildings. So if that were the case, if someone had a greenhouse that used the soil, we would allow them to do that. And that really was our intent initially, but we found that by isolating micro processing facilities and allowing for those and not allowing for anything else, we were inadvertently stopping people from possibly doing that in prime ag areas, growing crops in the ground in prime ag areas. The other couple of things that we tightened up were just repeating or stating the definition that the processing of cannabis or cannabis products could be constituted as an industrial use, and we wanted to ensure that was understood as well. Again, it's one of those things where we are isolating the cannabis processing and production as a use, but at the same time, we still want to have it captured in those broader categories like agricultural uses and industrial uses. And then the last one was simply just clarifying some site development requirements, particularly related to dark sky friendly lighting when we're speaking to lighting, and just ensuring that we have the specific requirements that we believe the township needs when they're looking for. And really, it's just a matter of providing some policies that gives the township discretion when when a new application comes in, when they review it, what they can ask for, what you can ask for, I should say. So really, those were the only things that we had changed. Again, they're not fundamental changes. They're just things that we thought would benefit the OPA and the ZBA. So that's what's before you today. And with your adoption and approval today, it can move on to the county to finally get approved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kent. It looks like a solid report. I read through it, and I certainly can understand how some of the direction we were taking was going to have what you referred to in the report as unintended consequences. And I think you've done a good job at anticipating those and trying to clear them up. Is there any further comment or questions from members of council on this report? Deputy Clerk? You're on mute, Bonnie.
On page 8 of the amendment itself, and item F, and this was likely on the report before, and I wasn't at the time. It is regarding the mitigation around odor. And basically, it is at the discretion of the municipality. Question why it wouldn't be blanketed and mandatory as instead of discretion. If you could just expand on that.
Through the mayor. So you're referring to F where it says all cannabis production processing facilities may be required to undertake odor screening studies at the discretion of the township. Is that the one that you're referring to?
That's correct, Ken. Yes.
Okay, so that's so you're asking if it could that would be changed or should be changed?
I'm questioning the rationale why it would be discretionary. That certainly is concerning when I spoke to other municipalities dealing with this. And I just wondered why we landed on discretionary versus that it is a compulsory requirement.
So through the mayor again, it would be at the discretion of township staff and or council. So it wouldn't necessarily, if someone were to come forward and there were concerns, whether from council, concerns from staff, you would have the ability to require an odor screening study or look into any matters related to odor screening. So we put that in there just as a tool for the municipality to use in case they needed to use it, or in cases where they felt they didn't need to have as much review, I guess, in that capacity. The main thing with these licenses is that they are fairly well covered in terms of what they have to provide for odor screening, what the applicant needs to provide for odor screening. We're going through and we're essentially getting the studies that they've already provided, or the information that they've probably already provided to the federal government. The other thing is that we do have clear setbacks in the zoning bylaw amendment as they relate to odor protection. So facilities that have odor protection or facilities that don't have odor protection, and how far they need to be from certain zones. So that's pretty ingrained into both the OPA and the ZBA. And with that specific policy that you've mentioned, that's really related mostly to it gives the municipality, if anything, it gives you more power because it gives you the ability to ask for more if you feel that you need to ask for more. So I think it really swings more towards control than anything, as far as I'm concerned. But obviously we're open to any suggestions that council may have.
My concern was this is certainly a learning curve for council and staff, and if we find out after the fact that there are odor issues and we have waived that, then it's the municipality and the staff in a compromised position. So that was where I was coming from. Why wouldn't it be? And I'm thinking after the fact.
Well, so through the mayor, I think that this policy allows you to ask for it every time if you so choose. we want it to be flexible in certain respects. So it says that all cannabis production and processing may be required to undertake at the discretion of the township, and I think that if someone is going through that process, we would want to have that assurance from an odor protection perspective. Assurance being like a study provided with an application. The township would want to have that if it's in the vicinity of sensitive land uses. We would certainly want to have that. I can understand what you're saying by why not just make it ask for it every time. And I guess my answer would be that it's not necessary every time, and so we didn't want to be too burdensome with applicants coming in. We wanted to find a balance. So that's really the reason why we did that, and why we wouldn't use the language that said every single facility will require an odor study.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I can add, and to Deputy Clerk's question, there may be a situation arise where somebody wants to put up a processing facility, and there were no other receptors within half a kilometer in any direction, and council at that particular application may determine an odor screening study is not necessary. But however, I would expect in any application to have receptors nearby, maybe as little as few as one, an odor screening study may be determined to be necessary. So I think that's where the discretion could come into play.
And Mayor Taylor, if I may, the other thing is that all of these facilities are subject to site plan approval, and I would presume, and this kind of ties into the site plan that we're about to talk about. I would presume that they would be subject to council's approval of the final site plan. So at that point, if the deputy mayor or any member of council has an issue with, or they see perhaps a potential issue with odor for that particular application, then they could ask for it at that point. So there is that control, that check in place to provide discretion from council's perspective.
Thank you.
Okay, does Deputy Clerk, does that satisfy your answer?
Yes, it does. I'm thinking this is certainly something new to everyone, and it's a learning curve for us all. So I just want to make sure, and when you say the site plan, maybe with some experience here, we'll be able to discretionarily, not
exercise
have it in
discretion. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's fine. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Barb next. Barb's got something she'd like to say, and then we're going to go to Councillor Powers. Barb, you want to add to that?
I just wanted to confirm, as far as the site plan goes, the CIO and the CBO were given authority to approve some site plans without going to council, but I just wanted to confirm to council that any site plan associated with cannabis will be coming to council.
Okay.
So you will have an opportunity to speak to it.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Barb. Okay, Councillor Powers.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. I think Barb may have answered my question there. Just this was certainly, of the whole report, the odor screening was the one that sort of caught my eye as this might be a bit of a challenge for us down the road, because I can see where you're going to have one producer say, well, hold on, the producer down the road didn't have to do it. Why do we have to spend the whatever amounts of dollars? So I think there might be challenges there, but as long as we can justify it and we can stand behind that justification as to what those particular reasons are, then I'm fine with that. I just realize that when we have it as a discretionary, you inherently create conflict between one got it and the other one didn't. That's just the nature of the discretionary piece, and we just have to deal with that. The only other comment I'll make is in the bylaw itself, it has the concept of air treatment control. And we have different bylaws and different MDS components, or different as it relates to the bylaw, depending upon whether or not the producer actually has air treatment controls or not. So my only comment would be, potentially we may want to look at, if it doesn't have air treatment controls, or they're not intending to put air treatment controls in, then we would probably want to have an odor screening as part of that application. As an example. But again, back to the discretionary piece, we could probably leave that up to discretionary potentially without having to modify the bylaw. But that's where I would be if someone wants to bring that application forward and they're saying we're not going to do any air treatment control. I'm probably going to say I think we need to do an odor screening. Just a comment.
Okay, fair enough. Any reply back to that, or it's fairly straightforward? I think the concern is easy to understand. Anybody else got any questions on the report or comments? This is Kent. Do you know, I know we're not the first township in the county to go through this. I know of, I think, 2 others. Any idea where we stand on this with regards to the other townships?
I know that I believe Selwyn, Barb, Barb might actually be a little more in tune with that because she's been working on the technical advisory committee for the new county OP. But I believe Selwyn has done it, and is it Duro Dummer? Yes. And
yes,
my understanding is that they've taken similar approaches. It just depends on some of the details about microprocessing versus some of them are actually I believe that Selwyn has actually not allowed them in agricultural areas. Is that correct? Maybe Sarah knows.
I don't remember exactly, but I think their distinction was between indoor and outdoor in terms of.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
So they have made a distinction between indoor and outdoor, Mr. Mayor. So our approach was that we weren't going to necessarily make that a distinction, but we were going to do it sort of indirectly, particularly when it's in a prime agricultural area, because that was our concern was with prime ag lands. So we've done that, but most of the other policies and provisions are fairly similar in terms of it's allowed, but you must have setbacks from certain sensitive land uses, and those setbacks are enlarged where there's no odor control.
Okay. Any further questions to Kent or Sarah or Barb on this, or any further comments from any staff? An OPA is a fairly significant piece of planning document, so we want to make sure that we understand it and we agree to it. Deputy Clerk? Go ahead, Bonnie.
One further question, Kent, in saying, in primary ag, we are looking at changing a lot of our rural to agriculture.
Yep.
So that's significant. Before, the rural would have been able to go into rural, then we're going to flip that land now to prime ag.
So through the mayor, it's still permitted in prime ag land.
Yeah.
It's certainly permitted, but we're not going to allow for large scale buildings that take up prime ag land. Some traditionally those facilities that should be in areas that are either industrial areas, or if they are in rural areas, they should be in rural areas where the soils aren't as productive. So that was our thinking behind that. I know that if there is a transition to a greater amount of, with a larger agricultural system, I don't know if that necessarily changes, the opportunities for people in the rural areas of the township.
Okay, so then would we be looking at the soil grades then in order to determine?
So through the mayor, so inherently they wouldn't be, those larger facilities that have like cement foundations essentially would not be permitted in prime ag areas. But any other type, if a facility uses the soil the native soils, then it's permitted as of right in those prime ag areas.
So outdoor versus indoor?
Yeah, outdoor or using the soils, but perhaps using a greenhouse cover. That's what we were thinking. So some of those facilities that maybe go beyond 200 square meters, which was our cutoff, our initial cutoff. Some of those facilities that go on over 200 square meters, but they may not be exposed to the elements, but they're using native soils and have cover, whether it's a greenhouse cover or some other sort of structure that provides cover from the elements.
Thank you.
Okay, council, we need to make a decision on this report. If you agree with the report and the recommendations in it, then I'm seeing Councillor Powers with his hand up. Nick, go ahead.
Motion to receive the report and approve the recommendations therein.
Okay, the recommendations, and then there's several recommendations that will be referred to the bylaw section of our meeting today. Okay, so Councillor Powers has made that motion. Councillor Howie has seconded it. Any further discussion on that? All in favor, please? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kent. Okay. Moving down now to the site plan control bylaw.
Yes.
You still got it. You still got the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. So the site plan control bylaw. So what we provide today is a new township-wide site plan control bylaw for your consideration. It deems the entire township subject to site plan control. I'm sure council is aware of site plan approval as a planning tool. I have provided a background of that and just sort of a quick 101. So really what we're looking for when we take in site plan applications are the details of the development. So the use at that point, when we are dealing with site plan, the use is permitted. And we are now looking at how that use is going to be laid out on a site. And this is obviously a very important tool, especially when you're dealing with large-scale development, industrial development, commercial development. You want to be sure where the devil is in the details, as they say. You want to be sure where parking is provided, proper ingress and egress, landscaping, the setbacks, whether the buildings are respecting setbacks that are laid out in the zoning. And so this is a very important control that the municipality has in that respect. So we are proposing this new site plan control bylaw. It's a lot more detailed than what was in place before. I'd mentioned the previous site plan control bylaw, 1787. There's I should also note that the site plan control bylaw that affects Burnham Meadows, this does not affect that because it has its own site plan control area that was deemed by that 2012-35 bylaw. So it doesn't impact that, but it impacts everywhere else. And just a few details that come up in the new site plan control bylaw are just repeating a lot of it's repetition from the Planning Act. But also we put a lot of things in there that we're allowed to do. We as in the township are allowed to ask for when people bring forward site plan applications, and we make that clear in the site plan control bylaw. So things like site servicing studies, stormwater management plans. These things are inherently, there's something that it's understood that they're always required, but it's good to have that in writing in the site plan control bylaw. It provides, again, that discretion. We were talking about discretion before. Provides the municipality with a little more discretion in terms of what they can ask for. It also requires applicants to pre-consult with township staff, so they have to, by this bylaw, meet with township staff and discuss the application. For the most part, we wouldn't accept anything. Especially for a larger scale development, we wouldn't accept anything without that meeting. But again, it's in writing. It's in the site plan control bylaw now. And there's also the delegation. Barb had mentioned that the council delegated approval authority for those minor applications. This is carried over into this new bylaw. There's no definition for what minor is. We find in a lot of those situations it gets too difficult to try to figure out what that should be. So rather we have it at the discretion of the designated site plan official, who obviously in this case is Barb, who would be the chief building official or the director of building planning. And then where there are minor alterations to existing site plan agreements, those can be made without any amendments to the site plan agreement that's in place, or it doesn't have to go to council. Also laying out that the requirement for securities, and again, a lot of these things are legally, the township is legally allowed to ask for, but it's good to have it clearly outlined in a bylaw. So that's in this new site plan control, fairly comprehensive site plan control bylaw, and I think it covers everything that we need to cover in such a bylaw. So I'm happy to answer any questions about it if council has any.
Questions from members of council? Barb, you want to comment? Go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, I'm just going to add a couple more things to what Kent said. So it's pretty timely that we're doing this to coincide with cannabis, because we have 2 or 3 applications that will probably be coming forward for cannabis. So we wanted this to be in place along with the cannabis. And as Kent stated, the previous bylaw was pretty loose, and we kind of relied more on a document that Eleanor and Jamie had created. It was more of a handout to people to say what we wanted on the site plan. So I'm very pleased that now all of those requirements plus more that we've added to it are now very specific in a bylaw. And just to, if I was to take an application in, the 3 things that I would look at as the top 3 I would look at to deem it minor or not minor would be the use that's being proposed, the size of the property that would be under SPA, and the main thing would be the interest from the public. If there was a lot of interest from the public during a zoning amendment process that was going to lead to an SPA, absolutely that would not be minor and it would be going to council. Or if it was an application that, the use was going to have a lot of comment from the public that we knew of, that again, that would not be minor in my view.
Okay, thank you, Barb. A question before I open it up to council, to you or Kent. Kent mentions that Burnham Meadows already has its own standalone site plan control bylaw. Is there nowhere else in the township, and I'm thinking of Belmere Winds, nowhere else governed currently by site plan?
No, the one that's on Burnham Meadows is very specific to the row housing. As you recall, you've seen a few SPAs come before you for the row housing. And then the other part in Burnham Meadows will be the commercial or institutional components. Belmere just falls under the rest of this SPA. And that's where we had some issues because the bylaw wasn't very clear. So that's a really good example of now that we have a clear bylaw going forward, we can pass that bylaw on to their planning staff, and they know exactly what needs to go into the SPA.
Okay, thank you. Good. Okay, Deputy Clerk.
Yes, through the mayor. And Barb, I guess the clarification then, we won't be having any individual site plan outside like we do for Burnham. I'm thinking of the new condos over at Stewart's Hall. Those that would come under this bylaw then, not.
Well, the Ambria or the Matchett Line development, that's a different scenario because that's condominium.
Okay.
Maybe Greg can speak a little bit more to that because I don't have too much experience in condominium, but my understanding is that everything that's inside the condo is at their discretion other than what we're approving, like infrastructure. Maybe Greg could touch on that.
That's correct, Barb. Everything within the condominium is governed by the condominium corporation. And if you recall, one of the items that they asked for specifically in their approval for their planned condominium were design guidelines for the condominiums. So that included everything from how they look to, what can be effectively done from landscaping and those sort of types of things. So the condominium corporation, they have those particular powers under their charter specifically for that condominium.
Okay.
Just following up through the mayor again to Greg. So the difference being these would be leased properties from one entity versus Burnham Meadows where individuals own.
No, in the planned condominium, they are freehold condominiums. So each of the individual properties are owned freehold by their owners, but they're the streets and everything are also owned by the condominium. So they're not public streets, and so everything falls under the common elements perspective of their condo agreement and their agreements of purchase and sale with each of the condo owners.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Powers.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Just following up on that point, because I did have Ambria written down here as a question mark. I'm curious now that Greg, you provided that clarification, and thank you for that. Is there any concerns with that from a township perspective, where we have a loss of potential control in terms of how the site plan is laid out? Just based on your comments there, or does it set us up for any concerns down the road?
No, I don't believe that it does set us up, because they're actually more tightly controlled than a regular subdivision would be, and there are a lot of prospective requirements that the condo corporation that owns the site would put on each of the property owners. So they're more strict than actually what would happen in a subdivision.
Okay, thank you. And if I can, Mayor Taylor, just the other question I had was actually around the securities requirement. So this is back to a similar one that we just had as it relates to the cannabis production and processing bylaw, which is currently it states that the securities requirement is to be determined by the township as to whether or not it's required and how much. That to me brings up even more of a concern than the cannabis one, which was we basically can identify whether or not you have to pay securities, and by the way, how much you have to pay as the securities. And so I'm just, if I can get some clarification on that, because that really's got my spidey senses going off a little bit. That's going to be a concern down the road, where you have one person saying, well, hold on, I had to pay this huge amount of securities, and the other person saying, well, I didn't have to pay anything, as an example. So just some comments around that would be helpful, clarification. Thank you.
I can comment to that. It's very clear in our tariff of fees bylaw. We have 3 levels of site plan fees. We have a minor, intermediate, and major. And within that document, it's described the difference between the 3 of them. So there's 2 different components. There is the application fee, which is very clearly laid out in our tariff of fees bylaw. So you'll be able to take an application and slot it into one of those 3 categories. The security deposit is basically based on the estimates of the project. And that's when the solicitor is involved and determines the percentages of those estimates. Does that answer your question?
So, but would we do that with every single project that has a site plan?
The administration fee or the deposit?
The deposit. That's where my clarification would be is, well, I had to submit a deposit and it was X amount based on the, as you say, with our solicitor, this is the amount. And then they get talking with another developer, and the developer said, oh, I wasn't required to submit any securities at all, any deposits. I wonder why we had to do it and the other one didn't. That's what I'm just curious. I'm just being a bit of a devil's advocate here and making sure that I fully understand the process that we would go through to say you need a deposit and you don't.
I would say the majority of the applications, because of they're a bit more complex, because normally an SPA is attached to a complex situation, we would be asking for estimates. I'm just trying to think of a very minor situation. No, that's not a good example. Let's say a commercial business on Highway 7 wanted to do a very small addition to their building. It wasn't going to affect parking. It wasn't going to affect anything. It was just a very small addition. Those are the ones that we would look at and go, there's really not any cost estimates associated with any works that concerns the municipality that we would want security for. But probably the majority of the applications are bigger events, so we would be asking for estimates.
And if I may add through the mayor, that normally securities are required where there are significant works on municipal lands or that would impact municipal lands. So like where sidewalk construction is required, or entrances or any sort of landscaping that may occur within the municipal road allowance or that sort of thing, and where it's necessary to ask for those securities. I can understand the concern where that somebody could come along and say that, oh well, this person didn't have to pay securities, but I not to speak for Barb, but I think that the staff is prepared to ask for it when they need to, and every site is different, and it's that's why we have these provisions that provide a little bit of latitude, because we want to be able to collect it when we need it, but we also want to be flexible so that we're not stifling people who don't necessarily need to provide securities and put up, because it's a lot of money to put up, especially if depending on the cost of construction. So I mean, I understand the concern. It's a difficult one to just kind of to say carte blanche. We'll ask for it every time. No.
Is that fairly standard fare that for most municipalities it's sort of a discretionary piece depending on the project?
Yes, through the mayor, yes, it is definitely something that you see in other municipalities. These projects differ so much, and we like to think that everything can be similar. Every restaurant is the same or whatever, but there are major differences in the site. There can be major differences. There can be major differences in what's being constructed. So that's why you have to sort of have that flexibility. And yes, we do see it in a lot of different places.
Okay, Councilor Powers.
Thank you.
I'm seeing Deputy Clerk.
I will move that we move bylaw. Oh my goodness, 20.
So receive the report and refer it to the bylaw.
Receive the report and remove 2020-23 to the bylaw section, which is repealing bylaw 17-87. So.
And a very well worded motion it was. We've got a motion then on the floor. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Allen. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, show of hands, please. All in favor of that motion? We've got carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Kent. That, I think, moves into the category of housekeeping. I think we wanted to knock that one off for a while. We finally got that.
Yeah, good that.
Okay, we're moving down now to a consent application for a Dillon Road project. Kent, again, are you going to lead the way on this one?
Yeah, yes, I will, Mayor Taylor. Thank you. So this one hopefully is the least complicated of the three, but we'll see. So this is an application for a severance at 2551 Dillon Road, part of Lot 22, Concession 10, Otonabee Ward. The severed parcel in this case, so basically it would be a run-of-the-mill severance. It's a severance for the property is going to encompass an existing residential dwelling and several accessory structures that are associated with that dwelling unit. So it would be your fairly run-of-the-mill severance, if not for the fact that it's slightly larger than what the township likes to see in the rural areas, in the rural residential properties. There is a policy in the that I'm sure you're all aware of in the township's official plan that speaks to that says that generally the size of severed lots will be 1 acre or 0.4 hectares. In this case, it's 0.6 hectares, is slightly larger. However, that policy does say that there is, again, discretion to allow for slightly larger lots. In this case, the increased size is again due to those existing structures. The lot needed to be a bit bigger to cut in and capture all of those structures. The applicant wanted to keep those structures together. So that was the reason for the slightly larger lot size. And I think given that the existing development is there, we're not creating a situation where we're going to have a large lot where somebody's going to be well off the road or any sort of negative impact resulting from it, particularly because there is existing development. So because of that, we feel that it's appropriate and that it meets the intent of that particular policy in the official plan. So we are recommending that council approve the severance or endorse the severance and the associated municipal appraisal form. So if council has any questions, we're happy to answer.
And Kent, just to clarify, that recommendation for approval contains 2 conditions.
Yes, that's correct. So cash in lieu of parkland, of course, the standard, and then also the condition to rezone the property from rural to rural residential.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Questions to Kent or any member of staff on this one? Or any member? Kent, I had one. I just wanted to clarify something. In the report, you talk about the retained lot contains an agricultural barn. This is the old Frank King property on Dillon Road, I believe. And I thought that barn was removed a couple of years ago. Are you sure it's still there?
I'm not sure, Mayor Taylor. I know that when they did their pre-consultation or the preliminary severance review, I believe it was still there because there were MDS issues associated with it. But I think that the intent was that they were going to be taking it down because of those MDS issues. So they may have taken it down already.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Members of council, any questions on it? Am I seeing any motion? Deputy Clerk. Deputy Clerk. Bonnie, you're on mute. Are you moving the recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Deputy Clerk has moved the recommendation, and Councillor Allen, you had your hand up. Are you seconding that, Mark? Seconded by Councillor Allen.
Yes, I'll second.
Any questions on this one? If not, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much, Kent.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kent and Sarah. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Okay, 12.4. 12.4 deals with one of the longest staff reports that I remember receiving. So I don't know, Greg, whether it's you or Barb or a tag team, who wants to speak to this one first? I know that you are looking for some direction from council, so I'm going to need a little background with it beyond what we've read here.
Yeah, why don't we let Barb start, and then we can add in and talk a little bit about the business continuity piece.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, this is a very long report, but we wanted to put as much factual information into this report so that council had all the facts to make some good decisions. The report's kind of 2 components: the building component, as far as building permits, which I think is fairly straightforward. It's going well, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because the report is very detailed, but I just wanted to jump over to the planning side of things. So the collaboration of the CAO, myself, the junior planner, and Ed Belboom from Russell Christie, we had a meeting and had some discussion, and that's the basis of this report. And Ed gave us some very good advice, and we have attached those documents for you. And it was basically navigating through the COVID period of how the government is putting some parameters and releasing timeframes with regards to applications. So we basically brought it down to 4 options for you to review. And I want to clarify option number 3. Option number 1 is just to remain as we are and not be taking any applications in. Number 2 is to start with minor variances. Selwyn is doing this. This is Selwyn's first initiative. Selwyn has a lot more minor variances, and I believe they're going to attempt to do the public meeting component to it as well. We don't have a lot of minor variances. Very rarely do we have them. Option 3, I just want to clarify that we already are in a position when it comes to the MAFs, which you've just approved, and site plan. These types of applications don't have a public meeting component. So we are able to proceed with those at this time. But the reason the option is there is because we wanted to highlight for you that when you do approve an MAF like you just did, there's 99% of the time there's a ZBA attached to it. So that's the next step that the applicant has to take, and that's the step that we can't do with them at this moment in time. Option 4 is to open OSM up to take all applications for receipt and technical review only. And the biggest message from Ed when we discussed this with him was about the public meeting process. And the public meeting process is very, very important. Other municipalities are attempting public meetings, some are not. It really comes down to, for us, because we don't have the best internet provider. Well, not everybody has the best internet access, and it must be a very public process. Everybody has to have the right and feel that they have been heard, and we just don't feel at this time through internet process and not being able for people to come to meetings that we are comfortable with going that far. That's why option 4 is just to receive the application and to assist the resident through obtaining the documents they need to have it in the position to deem it complete when we get to that next step. And I'll just let Greg take over.
So thanks, Barb. So the so really for the conversation that's been occurring, quite literally across the province is the I guess this is a really good example of the province sort of providing not a lot of guidance back to municipalities. They just sort of, I think, Mayor Taylor, one of the documents that you would have received, that and I know that we received and that Selwood received when we asked them for clarity about these public processes and such, was that we were to use our best judgment, and that from a legal perspective puts us in a really precarious position, and that's why we had the conversation with Ed. And so some municipalities are doing some planning processes, and doing the ones that are looking at applications that they think don't have a real public furor to them, I guess, and so they're going cautiously. I'm on conference calls with the Peterborough area CAOs about once every 10 days, and we're really struggling with this, and their councils are really struggling with this as well. And so part of the conversation we had here is the option is from the province, and it quite clearly states in our documentation, is that we're not opted to do so, we're not forced to do so. So that's why option 1 is in there. It's that we can continue to not do those particular things with respect to the Planning Act. We are taking, as Barb mentioned, building applications, and they're much more straightforward because there's no public component in there. We can issue a building permit without any public involvement at all. But the Planning Act stipulates that there has to be a public component. So the second option that we gave you, and to give you an example of what Selwyn's doing, and they're going really slow. And that planning report was passed, I believe, on the 12th of May. And they're looking at minor variances to try and improve things, or to approve some of their applications that they have in their, that they have received. The third item, which we just went through with the county. So the county, because they use delegated authority, they are dealing with consents, and the staff at the county have a delegated authority in order to review and to approve consent. So that's why that pipeline is, we're getting applications in that pipeline, so to speak, because the county has the authority to do that. And they look to the lower tiers in order for us to have the public meeting components related to the ZBA. And then the fourth option was sort of the wide open option. And so we wanted council to have a discussion, because the options are so wide, from the province saying to us, you can do nothing if you choose, to you can open it up and use your best judgment. And so that's a pretty wide area. And so as Barb mentioned, we did have a significant conversation and did get advice from Mr. Veldboom from Russell Christie on this matter. And we wanted to put it for a discussion with council, and certainly, as we said, we just dealt with option 3, which was the municipal appraisal form. So that gives you an example of sort of what we can do in that particular regard for option number 3. So I'll stop speaking and let council have an opportunity to ask us any questions that you might have.
Council, any questions on this? As you can see, a decision. We are hoping to get a decision from council. Councillor Powers.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Great report. Lots of really good information, very well detailed. So I commend staff, and background information was very beneficial in helping me to understand where we're at today and what are the options moving forward. I'm going to agree certainly with Barb and Greg's position as it relates to the public meeting. I, at this point, would not be comfortable defining what we're doing in this current format as an opportunity for a wholesome and transparent public meeting to be undertaken as it relates to planning decisions. So in my mind, anything that's related to planning decisions that have a mandatory public meeting or public component to it, in my mind, would be off the table until we can officially do that in a more transparent and more available way to our residents. And I don't feel that the virtual meeting that we have today is the most available to our residents, as some would struggle very mightily to access and or utilize this particular medium. And so I think that goes against some. Now, that being said, I don't think that precludes us from doing option 4. I believe that option 4 is probably our best opportunity and our best response here. There's no reason in my mind, aside from the public consultation component, that we can't proceed with other planning related activities up to the point of we need a public consultation or public meeting to take place. It seems logical to me that any planning related activities that lead up to, but not inclusive of, that public meeting should and can continue. So I'll just throw that out there that in my mind, I don't think this is the public meeting format that'll work, but I think that any planning activities up to that public meeting can and should be taking place.
Okay, do staff wish to respond or simply receive that and we'll move on?
Just receive that if you can, and hear some more comments.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Mayor Taylor. Going along the same lines as Councillor Powers in looking at the options that are presented today, item Option number 4, we would proceed to, or we would take planning applications and move forward with them up until the point of public. I believe it would allow us to be prepared for when the opportunity presents itself to move forward with those planning applications to a public meeting and be that much further along in the planning process. One question I have, and I think I did a little research and I think I understand it, but with every planning application or most planning applications, there's a timelines associated with them that we have to act as a municipality. And I think some of those timelines have been forgiven or postponed right now. Even if we were moving along with the planning applications, I think there's things like a year from that, certain things have to be done. I was wondering if Barb or Greg could correct me on that if I'm wrong. So I think what I'm saying is it would give us the opportunity to allow for planning applications to come in, process them up to a certain point, be ready to move forward with the public consultation as needed, or if a better format presents itself over the next few months, if this social distancing and requirement under the provincial orders for certain gathering sizes of 5 or less continues longer than maybe we hope for, but if it does, and an opportunity for public meeting, and we see other municipalities that that presents itself to us, maybe we could move along with that. But option number 4 would give us that opportunity to at least get to that point. So just clarification on the timelines with the planning act application as to if we take the application now and start the process.
Okay, staff, who can speak to the timeline requirements being waived?
I can speak to it a little bit, and Barb can maybe add some. So for instance, the municipal appraisal form that you just dealt with consents, that when a consent is approved by the county, there is a 1-year period for them to meet all of the conditions of consent. And so the applicant in that particular regard have to do those conditions that were on there, and they have 1 year to be able to do that. If they are looking to apply for a building permit, they do have to advise and show proof that they have met those particular conditions before we can issue a building permit. With respect to the other applications, those timelines, they differ. Some of them have been waived and some of them have not been waived. And that's part of the piece that Mr. Veldboom had given as far as advice in the document that's attached to this particular report. The one issue that we really struggle with beyond the public meetings is setting the expectation of the public. So once we take that application, we tell them we're only going to do technical review, and we're not sure when we're going to be able to act on it. That expectation is then set with the public, and that they may be looking for some sort of action to take place in the next call. So everybody has a different expectation. Some of them are 2 weeks, some of them are 3 weeks, some of them are a month. So when we say we're going to take your information and do your technical review, part of the challenge is we can't tell them how long we're going to put them on hold for. So we set that expectation, and the individuals that will get the first call about whether we don't meet the expectation is going to be council. And so we want to be clear about how we're sort of approaching these things, and that's why we gave the 4 options, with option number 3 being the dealing with the consents coming from the county. So Barb, I don't know whether I missed some things.
No, you pretty much covered it. Just make sure my with regards to the zoning amendment, the timelines that we usually have to deal with is when the application comes in, we go through it and we either deem it complete or not complete. If it's deemed complete, we can start working towards a public meeting. If it's not complete, we work with the applicant to have them collect the outstanding information. So the timelines associated with deeming an application complete for ZBAs and having a public meeting are on hold right now. Minor variances, it's the same for deeming the application complete. The only thing that really has changed with regards to minor variances, which apply to situations where the variance went to public meeting before COVID started, is the appeal period must go forward, but we don't have any of those situations here. NBAs are the biggest one that we're dealing with. We have a number of those that we know are going to be coming forward to us. So if council wants to go for option number 4, we would be accepting the application. We've got a document that will be included in the package for you that is very clearly outlines what we will be doing and what we will not be doing. This will be handed out and sent out to all our applicants as well as be on our website. But it very clearly states that we will not be going to public meeting at this point in time because the timelines are not in effect.
Okay, does that, Councillor Allen, answer your question?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Taylor. Thank you, staff. Much appreciated.
Okay, I've got Councillor Howie and then I've got Deputy Clerk. Go ahead, Ken.
Actually, Greg answered my question on what I had, so we can continue.
Okay, thank you very much. Deputy Clerk.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Taylor. I certainly option 4. I think it shows we are open for business. And certainly, Greg, to your point, the public may be asking council, but I think with COVID and so many changes out there, personally, I have no problem with answering those questions and us not doing a public forum. I feel we are able to do in certainly an open manner that it is deemed transparent. So I like number 4. I have one question around the emergency orders. So those time frames right now that we have to adhere to in a normal, I'll call it a normal world, have waived. As soon as the emergency order is lifted, how does our world change? Is it from that date on, Greg, or how is that?
Back through Mr. Mayor to the Deputy Mayor, the province is not clear on that. They've not given us any indication about how long we're going to have. So if we have this built up demand that's there, they've not given us any guidelines to say you've got 2 months to clear them or 3 months to clear them. So that puts us in a really difficult spot.
Another question, if I may, through to Greg. Therefore, if we had a number that we were ready, I think this is timely to do it in order to get the application started and the staff to identify where there are deficiencies. Could we have a meeting totally for public meetings if we come to the point that the emergency was lifted by the province and therefore we were out of the gate in order to clear them out? We may have to have several more meetings than we normally do in a month, and I'm certainly open to that in order to get the applications moving ahead. It is about growing the municipality.
I guess the one comment about that, we would still be subject to the province's conditions about giving notice. So under Section 34, so we would have to give a certain amount of notice for the public meeting to occur, and so we would have to. We just couldn't. If they lifted the order on the 1st, we couldn't have a meeting on the 2nd. In order to deal with these things, we'd have to actually go through the process and issue the public notice for the meetings and give notice of councils and give notice to those individual residents that are within the affected area as well. So that whole notice period kicks in, and we'd have a significant amount of work to do there.
So therefore, I wasn't clear on that, Greg. I do realize that those timeframes have to be adhered to. I was talking once the emergency was lifted, then that time period we would have to adhere to for notification would start once it was lifted then. And then we could have it, say, in X number of weeks or whatever.
Yeah, so, and Barb can comment a little bit. So what we would do is we would go to the provision that says and give them the notice that their application is complete, and that's when the clock starts ticking after we give them that notice of a complete application. I believe that's when the time frame starts. Correct, Barb?
That's correct. So, so let's say that we have 5 applications that come in the next. If you approve option number 4, let's say we have 5 applications that come in, and we work with the applicants on having them get to the point where they can be deemed to be complete. When the emergency order comes off, we would be sending notices out immediately to say this is a notice that the application is complete, and at that very same time, we would be setting up a public meeting. Because the notice of completion is basically saying the notice is complete and here's the date of the public meeting.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That's great. Both Greg and Barb, thank you.
Okay, and if I could just get something confirmed that concerns me from Barb or Greg, and that is that if we receive various types of planning applications, I want to make sure that the applicant is clearly told that staff can review them and move them along to a certain stage of the process. But a decision cannot be made by council until such time as a public meeting requirement can be met. And right now, that can't be met. So Greg talked about creating false expectations, and that could be a concern if we don't address that clearly right at the very beginning. So Barb and Greg, you have some sort of plan or information to deal with that. Is that correct, Barb?
Yes, that's correct. So part of this document that we put in the package for you, the very bottom paragraph says planning approval process. No statutory public meetings will be held until further notice. Council and/or committee of adjustment decisions will not be made on planning applications which require a statutory public meeting. So we're making it very clear through written form and through any emails or any communication that we have with our applicants, that message will be very clear. And this will be going on our website as well.
Very good. Could you highlight that section when you hand it out, please?
There's also an additional section too as well, Mr. Mayor and members of council, is that one of the conditions that have been waived on applications is some applicants will appeal their application to the local planning tribunal because there's been no action taken by the municipality. So that particular no action provision has been waived by the province. So typically, Ambry is a good example. They made their application for their plan of condominium, and then they appealed their own application before it was heard. So that's a little bit of a strategy to move things along, but those particular provisions have been waived.
Okay, thank you. Well,
I'll just
go ahead, Barb. Yeah.
mention one more item. Normally, when an application comes in, it has to be commissioned by the clerk. So this is another requirement that's waived at this point in time. So we have this covered in this document as well, that with respect to commissioning of an application, this requirement is temporarily waived. However, completion by the Commissioner of Oath will be required prior to the municipality issuing notice under the Planning Act. So the process will be this. If council approves option 4, we will be taking applications in and reviewing them for technical review only. When the emergency order is lifted, the very first item that they're going to have to do is come in and have it commissioned and signed in front of the clerk. The second thing will be is we will deem the application complete and have a public meeting set. And then the third thing will be to go to a public meeting.
Okay. All right, very, very clear. Thank you very much to staff. It's obviously, there was a tremendous amount of work and thought went into this. I do see it as a means of displaying that we want to continue moving our township forward in spite of the current condition. We're going to try to do what we can for our residents, but to a certain extent, what we can do is limited by the situation we're in. So I appreciate everything that's gone into this. I'd like to know if any council member are willing at this time to make a decision on the potential motion should be to receive the report and approve option number, whatever number you feel is fit. Councillor Allen?
I would make that recommendation to receive the report and recommend number 4 as Gus.
Okay, Councillor Allen has receive and approve option 4. I'm seeing Councillor Howie. Second in that, Ken? Seconded by Councillor Howie. Any further discussion on the motion? All vote, all in favor. All in favor of that motion? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, Council, and thank you to staff. Good discussion. Okay, we're going to move down now to bylaws, and I would ask the clerk. I guess what I should do is, can I get a motion, please, to read bylaw 2020-20, 21, 22, 23, and 24 a first time? Moved by Deputy Clerk, second by Councillor Power. All in favor? Carried. I'd like the clerk to review the bylaws for us, please.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. 2020-20 is the Herming bylaw, which is your May 11th special and regular council meeting. 2020-21 is your planning OPA cannabis amendment. 2020-22 is your planning ZBA cannabis amendment. 2020-23 is your planning site plan control. And 2024 is your financial procurement policy. It's an update.
Thank you. Yes, and that was a lengthy document as well. Any questions to the clerk or any members of staff on these bylaws? Seeing no, Councillor Howie, your question?
Just could I get a clarification on one of the bylaws?
Okay.
Yeah, it is on, what is it, 2024?
Right. Procurement.
Section 15.4. Conflict of interest, does gov deals require council approval for elected official, officer, and employee to go and bid on that site, or is that considered a public auction, public disposal of excess equipment and stuff?
You would still be considered a council member.
Sorry, Heather, could you repeat that?
Any member of council that wishes, or a staff person that goes on gov deals, you would still have to declare that because you are still acting in that capacity.
Okay, no, that's good.
Okay, thank you. Was there another question, Deputy Clerk? Mute, Bonnie, mute.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good now.
Okay, if someone, in order then, through the mayor to Heather, in order to bid on a piece of equipment on gov deals, you would have to declare a conflict to the municipality, and then you could go ahead and bid. I just need clarification around that.
If you're a staff person or a council member, then yes, you would have to advise council that you were wanting to participate in gov deals to bid on a particular item.
So could you do a blanket declaration if you were going to be active on that, or you would have to specify each individual piece of equipment as you bid?
You would have to specify each individual unless the CAO has a different option.
I guess my advice would be that we would specify for each item. Then it might be a good housekeeping task for us to, bring a report to council that says that this particular disposal is going to be sold to this individual. and a member of staff or council so that there's a public record.
Okay, so what my concern is, if it has to go in front of council, then we need to be aware of what's going on Gov Deals prior, because it is public. Anybody can bid against the council or a staff member. And to me, it just enhances, if the more people that bid, certainly increases the price. So I'm looking at the bottom line. So could then anything going on Gov Deals be brought in front of council that council and staff are aware, so they could declare a conflict and therefore go ahead in the bidding process?
So I guess my comment, Mr. Mayor, through to the Deputy Mayor is, from my experience here from dealing with Gov Deals, is everything we put on Gov Deals, council's been made aware in a departmental report, right? So, since we've been here, I think we sold, our intention is, I think we've sold a couple of items, including the business or the building department vehicle, for instance. So you knew that was going to be disposed of. So we only sell a small amount on Gov Deals, and typically they're larger items. And so council would be aware in the departmental report that was the recommended means of declaring something surplus and to sell it being surplus.
Okay, so therefore the continued practice of letting council know, and by that way staff, prior to it listed. Okay, that's
correct.
Fair.
Any other questions from members of council on any bylaw? Councillor Powers, go ahead.
Just again with the procurement policy, I'm just curious if the dates are correct. This policy has not been touched in 11 years. And I'm just curious, in 11 years, what has changed? Because there was no indication, there was no report that identified any change. I'm curious if someone would be able to provide a quick summary of what are the changes to this document since 2009.
You are correct, Councillor Powers. Just some updates to the new language updates. The trade show purchases, that was a change from the last policy. The contract provisions, disposal of surplus assets. Prior to, council and staff were not eligible to bid on any items. That was a change. Sets out new wordings in sections 17, 18, 19, 20, 23, and 24.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and just to Councillor Powers' comment, and I had the same question as I was reading it through, and to staff, it might be helpful when you're submitting anything that's come up for a review or an update, if you simply put an asterisk or some notify us somehow as to what changes are being made or added to the old document, so we can take our attention to that. Just something to keep in mind for the future. So any further questions on staff from council to staff on any of these bylaws? And then could I get a motion, please, that bylaws number 2020-20, 21, 22, 23, and 24 be read a second and third time, signed, sealed, and the court seal attached. That's moved by Councillor Howie and it is seconded by Councillor Allen. All in favor? Is carried. Thank you very much. Moving down now to correspondence. Certainly one of my favorite reports, the farm tax credit and the OMBF funding. What's councillor's decision on this? Deputy Clerk? Go ahead, Bonnie.
Sorry, I'm unmuted again. I would move that we support this.
Deputy Clerk has moved to support this resolution. Anybody willing to second that? Councillor Allen. Further discussion? Yeah, discussion, Nick? Or I can't tell you, supporting the motion or discussion?
I am just supporting the motion and appreciating the report.
All in favor of that? All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, information. Received for information purposes. You've got the notice of decision of OPA number 5 that dealt with the town and country business that we talked about, I think, at our last council meeting. and the Enbridge gas energy notice. Any questions from any members of council on that? Seeing none, I'd just like a motion, please, to receive the information package. Councillor Allen, Councillor Powers, all in favor? That is received. Anybody got anything for other matters? Deputy Clerk? Go ahead.
Around Burnham Meadows and the park situation up there, could we get an update? If not at this meeting, just back to all of council for the park area for Burnham Meadows. What point is it at?
So perhaps if I can jump in, it's not on that's not on the agenda, and it's probably an issue of public interest. Perhaps if staff could bring a report back to our next meeting as to the status of the park ground at Burnham Meadows. Is that what you're looking for, Deputy Clerk?
Yes, just an update.
Okay. Greg, does that sound all right to you?
Yeah, I'll talk to Mike and we'll see whether we can get it to the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any Deputy Clerk, you had something else?
Just another information and interesting around the Enbridge personal house owned by our daughter, and she paid for a connection for Enbridge into that house a few years ago. There was a class action suit, and Enbridge has informed her she will be getting that fee back. And I didn't know how that possibly could fit into Enbridge. I know with our talk with Enbridge about extending the pipelines through Hiawatha, et cetera. But just for information for all of council, there was a class action suit, and the suit was won by the residents.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing nothing else for other matters, we have nothing for closed session. Just looking for a motion to adjourn. I'm seeing Powers and Howie. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, staff. Thank you, council. It's scary, but we're getting, I don't like to say we're getting good at this, but we're getting more comfortable with it. Thank you. Thank you. Good.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Good night.